We're going to be taking a more regular look at what's happening in US politics as the early stages of campaigning really start to get underway and more candidates enter the field for the presidential contest next year. We've also seen, of course, over the last week or two, more problems in the social fabric in the United States, particularly with those riots in Baltimore, on top of the race problems we've seen in Ferguson and before that in South Carolina and Staten Island and so on. With us now, Tom Switzer from the US Studies Centre and Bruce Waltke, a former Democrat congressional aide. Thank you both for joining us. And before we get to the candidates entering the presidential race, I just want your thoughts on what we've seen most recently in Baltimore. Bruce, when Barack Obama came to office, there was a lot of hope that this would be a new era for the often troubled race relations in the United States. Has it been? I mean, from what we've seen, at least in recent weeks and months, there are big problems still there.
A lot of hope, David, that President Obama would issue in a post-racial America, and that hasn't come to be. There have been a series of incidents in South Carolina and Staten Island, in Ferguson, Missouri, and just too many where black men in particular are the victims of police violence on the streets, and it's caused a whole huge amount of racial unrest. Polls out show that the country now is more pessimistic about the future of race relations than it was even 6 months ago. And so the trend in that direction is poor. I think there are some underlying things that are more positive, but for the moment, tensions are high. People are watching it very acutely. They're upset. They wonder if justice will be done, and it is hurting the fabric of the country at least a superficial level.
Yeah, Tom, what do you make of what we've seen happen in the United States, and really how President Obama is approaching this as well?
Well, I think at first glance it's very easy to see that all the progress that the United States has made with an election of a black president it's been evaporated in light of the spate of killings of African Americans at the hands of police brutality. But I think you have to remember that the election of Barack Obama in 2008 never really represented a post-racial presidency. It was merely a reflection on how far the United States has come in the last few decades on race relations. And I still think that, all things considered, America is a more progressive place today than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. And all the available evidence seems to indicate that. Now, this spate of black killings at the hands of police has happened a lot in the last year. I suspect a lot of it has to do with the fact that we're more aware of it now thanks to technology.
Yes.
And I think that you also have to remember, in the case of Freddie Gray, who was killed with spinal death just a few weeks ago, that sparked the Baltimore riots. 6 policemen have been charged and arrested, and 3 of those policemen were actually African American. So we need to put this in some sort of broader context. I think it's more about police brutality rather than police racism.
Than racial problems. And it's a good point about technology too, whether it's people with a mobile phone capturing what police are doing or have done in these incidences. CCTV as well, Bruce.
Yes, I think we're more aware. I think the rate of police brutality in America has not changed. I think we're more aware of it because there's more coverage of it, and it's now universally available. And so I think but I don't think the rate of police brutality has changed. But what is also happening is that what you see, the reaction to it, it gets to Tom's point. White Americans are increasingly concerned about what's happening to black America. And I think there's a lot of holding of hands across the divide to bring people together. So that's the underlying hopefulness.
How do candidates approach this? How are candidates approaching this, or are they too scared to approach it?
I think Republican candidates have not wanted to engage very seriously with it. President Obama, as Tom said, has really has given several speeches, and everyone is looking at him as an African-American president. As each of these things occur, what's his reaction going to be, and is this a teachable moment for the country? And Hillary Clinton gave an important speech last week on it.
Yeah, I think, Bruce, also Rand Paul has distinguished himself from other Republicans by talking about the plight of African Americans, particularly in inner city areas, falling school grades, overzealous police law enforcement. I mean, Rand Paul, a Republican, who probably won't get the nomination, but he has talked a lot about this, hasn't he?
I think he's pretty competitive, but he did make an offhand comment that he was hoping his train would kind of go through Baltimore last week, and that hurts. But the underlying issue for Republicans, again, is capturing the middle, and can they engage with African Americans, with Asians, with Hispanics, and broaden their base? And so that's a structural issue for the Republican Party.
Well, let's talk about the ever-expanding field of Republican candidates now. Carly Fiorina, Ben Carson, Mike Huckabee all getting in this week. That's on top of those who've already nominated Rand Paul amongst them. Now, Tom, what can you tell us about these new candidates in the field?
Well, Carly Fiorina is about 60 years of age. She's from California. She came from being a secretary in a real estate company to becoming the chief executive of Hewlett-Packard. It's no mean feat. She's quite sound in substance and style. She's articulate. She will be no Sarah Palin. But look, she, like the other candidate who announced his intentions today, Ben Carson, she has no executive experience. She's never been a politician. Ben Carson's 63. He came from a very poverty-stricken family to become one of the world's preeminent neurosurgeons. Again, he hasn't had any political experience, and I think it's important to bear in mind that not since 1953 has an American president come to power without any executive or legislative experience, and that president was Dwight Eisenhower, who happened to be a five-star general who basically liberated Western Europe from Nazi Germany. So it's very hard, I think, for a political outsider, someone who's running against the establishment, to win the nomination and then be seriously competitive. They'll struggle to win.
Yeah. Yeah, and Bruce, what does this mean, however, for the main contenders in the Republican Party, that you're going to have such a crowded field? I mean, is it particularly crowded, or is this pretty normal?
This is really crowded. I mean, we think a PM's 11 is big. This is a President's 13, and it's and it's really growing. So, that fragmentation means it's tough for someone to kind of command a majority and really set out to clear the field. So you have your big names like Jeb Bush and so forth, Marco Rubio rising. You have Rand Paul out there with a great organization, and of course Jeb Bush. Now, Carly Fiorina, I think, is kind of interesting because I think she sort of has vice president written all over her as an executive, as a Californian, as a woman. And she is going to take on Hillary Clinton. She already has in making her announcement. And so she's going to show the guys as to how to take down Hillary Clinton, and she may get rewarded for that later on in the process.
And on the other side, it's the opposite, isn't it? I mean, Hillary Clinton still has pretty much a clear run. However, Bernie Sanders is in the race now for the Democrat side. But clear this up for me, Tom. Is he actually a Democrat, or is this just a protest nomination?
Well, he's an avowed socialist from the most left-wing state in the Union, Vermont. He's 73. He's well to the left on all the major political issues. He has no chance of winning the nomination. The only practical political question about Bernie Sanders is whether he will be do well enough to be a stalking horse for a more creditable challenger from the left, someone like Elizabeth Warren to come in on the scene. You may recall in 1968, Eugene McCarthy won the New Hampshire primary, scared the living bejesus out of Lyndon Johnson, the sitting president, which forced him into an early retirement, and that set the scene for Robert Kennedy to come in. It's much harder these days for candidates to come into the electoral cycle very late in the scheme, but nevertheless, if Sanders lands some blows against Hillary Clinton, it may well set the scene for a more credible Liberal candidate. And already Hillary Clinton is moving a bit to the left. She's come out in the last week or so distancing herself or raising serious doubts about the President's signature trade policy, the TPP, which is quite remarkable when you consider that as Secretary of State, she authored the TPP.
He has nothing to lose, David, and so he'll be out there, and he's a person of integrity intellectually. He cares about the issues very much, so he can throw these bombs and see if any hit, and he can practice the politics of joy, and that's what he's going to do. And it'll to some extent keep Hillary Clinton honest, if you will, be on her game, because she can't afford for this thing to slip away. But he will be able, as Tom says, he'll be able to shift the debate contours of the debate more on the progressive side, and that serves his purpose.
Yeah, not a serious threat, but at least a contest that's, I would suggest, something Hillary probably needs. It's not a serious threat, but a contest.
It's a contest.
All right, great to talk to both of you. Yeah.
The press will have to pay attention to him because he's in there. So that'll count for something.
Yeah, exactly. All right, look, great to talk to both of you. I look forward to more conversations as things unfold in what is always an interesting political contest. Tom Switzer, Bruce Waltby, catch up soon.
Thanks,
David. Bruce.
Now.